sell his product. And eventually he got to the point where he built a demand for himself and he didn't need a record company. Now record companies were offering him deals, and he was known to really tell them, well, hey, if you want me to deal with me, you got to give me this, you got to give me that, you got to give me this. And if they said they didn't want to, he said, okay, no problem. I'll go back on the road. I'll have my records in the trunk of my car, and I'll hustle it. And I think Nigeria worked that kind of, they have that kind of mindset. That was very much like hip hop. Like, we didn't have any record label to support us, so how those first, say the first generation of rappers, how we made money or how they made money, because I wasn't really first generation, I'm more the second generation who kind of observed them. I got to see them still when it was local music, before people had record deals, and that's what inspired us to want to do it. But they made money doing local shows. It wasn't anybody downtown saying they were going to book a rap. They didn't even consider it even music. And that made a financial base for them to, okay, go buy some more turntables, buy some more speakers, buy some more whatever you needed to make your thing bigger. So I don't really subscribe to the fact that we need a company to do that, but you do need to know how to be business-minded. You can't not now waste, you know, you have to really be able to look at your whatever your audience is and learn how to grow that. And I think those are the things that help you get going. Now, if a bigger company comes and wants to do business with you, at that point, you could even make a better deal, because at that point now you have leverage. At the beginning, you don't have any leverage, and anything that you don't have any leverage that you start, it's going to cost you, you know. And sometimes it costs you something that you don't really understand then when you're giving it up. You understand after you've given it up what you actually gave up, and you're going to say, damn, I wish I would have maybe went a little longer. I didn't really want to sign away that publishing. I really didn't want to give the master up. I really didn't want, because you know the value of it now after losing it. But if you understand the value in the beginning, you can, I think you can grow it. So don't give up hope in your independent world, because pretty much all of the artists that we would say from the past that we all admired, whether that's Sam Cooke, whether that's any one of them, they all were independent, because no black artists were getting major record deals. So the only reason we know these people is because they were independent. Now they got a certain success in what we would call the Chitlin circuit or the black neighborhoods, you know, and from there, a bigger company said, wow, we want them. But at the beginning, if Aretha Franklin walked in the door, I'm sure there were many doors were shut on her. I'm sure there were many doors shut on Ray Charles. I'm sure there were many doors shut. Matter of fact, I know there were many doors shut on Ray Charles. But now, once they were able to break that first level, which now would be for us kind of the same thing, being independent, now, yes, an Atlantic Records came, or this person came, or that, and now the rest is history, because we know them with hit records. You know, if you look at the first demo tape of Michael Jackson, when you see him 6 years old, 7 years old. These kids were in Gary, Indiana. They didn't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of, you know, but they had talent, they had drive, they had commitment, and then they met a person like Barry Gordy who said, okay, I see something there. But still, even with that, it still took a while of development and all of these things, training, but this is what builds a career, right, as opposed to a hit song, because you can have a song that comes and goes, but to have a career means you got to have some kind of foundation that was built, and that foundation will be built through hard work, right? So the independent way is still the way. Okay, now a question. Yes. No, go ahead. We got a small, this is like an intimate thing, so it's cool.
Right. Okay, so my next question is, so using myself as an example, I've been successful as an actress and recognized for my work there. And as a singer, I haven't put anything out yet, but I've been working on stuff. And one of the biggest challenges I have is because people, they see you excellent in one of them, you know, you also want to be excellent in the other. And yes, you talk about hard work, and of course that's very important. But you know, just the dilemma of transiting from one to another, and you know, finding balance.
Yeah.
What would you advise could help to find that balance with when you're talented and you have different ways in which you express yourself.
Well, you ever put any of your music in any of your films?
Actually, I haven't.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
That's it. Start there.
Okay.
Most music now is being pushed through on streaming platforms, and it's associated with films. I'm working with a publishing company right now that's asking me to reproduce old classic songs, a couple of songs that are owned by this particular company in a new format, just for film, not even for commercial release. Because music supervisors, which I've done that work as well, they look for music that's not difficult to clear. Sometimes clearing music for films can be very expensive. So if you have another leverage because you're the talent. So if you're already the talent and you have the relationship with the director or the producer, that's the person to bring your music to. Just say, hey, especially if you know now the scenes, and if something that you have in particular you feel can work for it, or you write something for it and say, hey, listen to this. One film alone could make your way. All right, so now when that movie blows up, I'll be looking for my commission, you know what I'm saying? I'll just play it. And yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. I work in film and documentary, and I'm just really, really curious, especially because you've been so deep, and you are so deep within the music industry. What did Summer of Soul do to that, to all that incredible music that, has sort of been brought forth again? And the second question also about that is when I watched Summer of Soul, I looked at these enormous crowds, and there was like such deep royalty in music then. How could that have all been buried, and what has that documentary done to that time and the music of that time?
Well, I actually haven't seen it yet, so I can't really speak specifically. I mean, I know Questlove, and I know that, what it's about, what the film is about. But, I mean, as you speak about soul music or music from that time and the audiences and those kinds of things, I think that one of the things I would say that has gotten a little bit lost is the knowledge of music and playing music, Hip-hop, again, if we're going to go to the beginnings of like what I'm talking about in the Bronx, I heard this rapper one time, he's a guy, Grand Poobah. He was in a group called Brand Nubians, and he was talking about music and artists from the past, and he said, hip-hop was never about replacing a band or replacing live music. We actually were fans of it. That's why we played the records. Like, we were fans of Fela. We were fans of James Brown. We were fans of George Clinton. We didn't say, okay, we don't need a band anymore or need George Clinton. But now, once the business of sampling and the business of technology and business coming together, I think there was a push of, okay, this is cheaper. We don't have to have 10 musicians in the studio. I could just have a turntable and I can take the musicians. Or we don't need to have a whole choir singing. We can just get that part from here and put some auto-tune on it, and that's fine, right? But now, I'm not gonna say that that's not an art form or that's not something that's viable, because I did it too. But at the same time, I had an appreciation for musicians and the artistry of, and a respect for what it takes to become a great musician. And if we lost, I think, a bit of the support of that. All of those, if you think about bands, if you look in the 70s, and I'm assuming I can kind of, without even knowing the movie, when you say crowds, the kinds of groups that were performing and the kinds of musicians, I mean, that took everybody in a documentary like that, put time in rehearsing, put practice, sweat, desire, not I just need a check before I need to do any work, because you couldn't compete on that level without having done that. So I think the result of that is, if we push that forward maybe 20 years, 30 years, you don't know how to play an instrument anymore. You know, you don't know how to arrange a band. You don't know how to stay focused to come to rehearsal. Who's going to want to do that? You're not getting paid to come to rehearsal. You know, where there used to be what we call garage bands. That's even why probably they call the program garage band, because that's where all the bands used to be, in a garage. You know, you'd see 4 or 5 guys together on a Sunday, and they're in the garage, you know, what we would call shedding, working it out, trying to figure out a new song, trying to figure out a new part. That culture sort of got lost in the desire to be famous and make money and say, okay, we want to get from A to Z. We don't necessarily want B, C, D, E. That kind of goes back to what I was talking to you about, the independent artists, because you even take somebody like Quincy. Quincy started as a horn arranger, a trumpet player, and then doing arrangements. If you read his book, you see it was a lot of times you didn't get paid, a lot of struggle, a lot of hustling, a lot of work, but these guys love the music, so because they love the music, they develop their craft and put the time into developing their craft. I think that's the main thing, that if we don't teach that again, you know, if we don't encourage that, that's important, not just how big your chain is or how much money you got, or again, back to how many likes you have. All those things are good, but that's like looking at the end and not saying, well, what do we need to do at the beginning? So I think that's affected that when you're talking about, you know, live music. And, you know, technology is never going to go away, so it's only going to increase. So yes, if somebody can run a track and not have to pay 5 people, and you're not making the kind of money you need to do a show, you're not going to convince them to say, well, it's a better idea for you to go rehearse this band and spend all your money and do that, when I could just play a record and somebody can sing and I can make my money. So yes, that's a way, but I think if we want those things like we saw then, we do have to encourage music and music education and see it as important, see it as something that is not just, oh, yeah, playing some music. No, see, no, this is important, you know. It doesn't mean that you're going to become a professional musician, but the skill set of exposing a young mind to that there are those that will become those people. But if you never give them that, if they never get exposed to that, then that whole generation would never actually they wouldn't even come out. They wouldn't even, because there's no seeds there. Everybody had to start somewhere. Everybody looked at somebody. You know, everybody looked at somebody that was before them and tried to emulate something. But if you're trying to emulate something that there's no access to it, even if you want to emulate it, you really can't, because there's no instruments. There's nobody teaching you how to do it. There's nobody, you know, we just would have to really look at passing that on. So maybe now you're giving me the reason to go pick up the documentary and look at it again if I see if it had that kind of an impact on you.
Yeah, it felt urgent, and it felt like, you know, I guess that was the age where people dressed the same and spun, you know, and had the froze, and it just felt urgent. Like, we have to sing this now.
Yeah, well, that's one thing.
It was beautiful.
You touched on that word urgent. That's something else James Brown said to me. He said that we talked one day about going in the studio, and he said that studio time was urgent. And he used that word, and I was like, urgent? Like, studio was, first of all, it cost money. So when you went to a studio, you expected that everybody knew what they were there to do. And this wasn't a time when there was machines to, we can fix that later. Oh, you can just put some auto-tune on that and do that. Oh, well, you know what, if we didn't hit it. No, when guys came in, it was urgent. You have to get it right. You have to play it right, because this is the moment, and then we're out of here. So what is going to happen? It's like a snapshot, right? As opposed to, like, imagine catching a picture of a moment, an action shot, as opposed to a portrait. Okay, we're going to set up the portrait, and we're going to do this, and we're going to put the proper lighting. That's not how these people went to the studio, because the studio was expected to be prepared, and we're going to come here and do it, and when we do it, we did it. There is no doing it again. If we do it again, it's going to be something else. It's not going to be what we just did. It's that moment. So that sense of urgency is the same thing like going to the stage. It's urgent. When we come to the stage now, the people are here, we're here, we got to give them a show. This is urgent, this is important, and that comes out in the music. Every note is important. Everything we have, that kind of mindset, I'm so thankful now as I see my master teachers like Quincy or like George, I call him Uncle George, George Clinton, or James Brown, these people that I actually got to talk to them, or Harry Belafonte, you saw me there with Harry. Like, that mindset, if you can't speak to the person directly or feel that, you won't know it. So once that generation gets lost and we don't pass that, it's hard to make someone understand that, because if you're in a ready, it's like saying we got microwave food. So if you had to cook a meal, you got to wake up early and prepare. You got to go get the chicken, clean it, do the thing, put it aside. Because what time is dinner? Dinner's at a certain time. So this is not something you just go, oh, it's an afterthought. Oh, yeah, we're going to come to that. Just pop it in the microwave and throw a little salt. And then no, it's not like that. So that's not how we did music. I was around, a lot of the Wailers, Bob Marley's original musicians, Elder Rastaman. And when you were around them, I never saw seriousness in a studio between old blues musicians and the Elder Rastaman. When it was time to go to the studio, I mean, literally, guns might come out. You mess up a note, somebody pulling a bomba club, why? Well, yeah, boy, you're crazy. You better know what you're doing, because this is not no joke thing. It's music we dealing with. So now when you have people that come to music like that, this is why you have a high level of musical performance, because everybody, imagine if that whole group is like that, the drummer's like that, the bass player's like that, the keyboard player, and they're all checking each other and making sure they do the best. So now when the singer comes, and that's the voice, and we're coming on top of the singer is coming with that same mindset. When the singer turn around and look at the band, when James Brown turn around and look at that guitar player, you better make sure you hit that note right, because Mr. Brown is going to take your money, you're going to pay him some money, and you might get smacked in your face too at the show. This is how serious, but again, it's something to laugh about, but it's not, because what makes a Herbie Hancock be who he is? Because Miles Davis was there looking at him as a little boy saying, you better get that right. And you're going to get it right. Or what makes Quincy be a certain level? Because Count Basie was standing over there and Quincy had to answer to him, right? So now who does that create? Quincy Jones. So now when Michael Jackson is in front of him, is he performing just because there's an audience? Or is he looking to say, I can't let Quincy down, because who's in the lineage of him? Right? Or when I come to the studio and there's a young artist in front of me and I'm saying, hey, I need that again, or I need that. Well, who's in the lineage of Gordon? Oh, all of these people. So that's what you see in that kind of a documentary. And I think that is necessary for artists to get that. Yes, ma'am. Yes. It was you? No, it was her.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm okay, and you?
Good.
I just have a question, because obviously you're an industry leader. So I'm obviously very young, and I also grew up listening to a bit of old music and also modern music. But something that I've noticed as the youth of this generation is, how does one, especially a producer or an agency, differentiate between talent and popularity in terms of singing or acting? Because that's what it's come to with social media and technology, is that as soon as you have popularity, you can decide, I want to be a singer. And it's not solely based on talent anymore. So you, as a producer, which do you think is more valuable in the long run?
What's your name?
Crystal.
Are you an artist?
No, I just paint.
So you're an artist?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you judge a good painting?
I think with painting, it's just perception, really. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be successful.
No. Just leave success out of it. Your perception, really. So your perception of something that looks good. What as an artist now? I'm asking you as a person who does it. Do you think about the hand that created it, or you just look at it and you go, I like it or I don't like it? As a professional, like if you're looking at it from a standpoint of a professional piece of work.
I feel like looking at it initially, it looks good to me, and I'm attracted to that type of painting. And then I think the more I look at it, the more I'll think about what the artist went through and how do they come to this painting. But initially, it would be
Why are you just looking?
Yeah.
That's exactly the same thing with the song. Exactly the same thing. Most people, the initial thing, they just hear it, especially if they're not a musician. I asked you as a professional, because as a professional now, what you're going to look at are those details after, right? But your initial thing, when you look at it, just, do I like it or not, right? That's how people in the past judged music, before there was a popularity contest, right? Likes and all of these things. Now, as a business person, if did you see the Ray Charles movie? With Jamie Foxx? Did you see that movie?
I did.
You did, okay. So you see how their business at that time, and I'm using that time because this is the time before, this is the purely analog time, before we get to digital now and mass, maybe, production. He had to go from place to place and move people, right? And because he moved people, a promoter will say, what? Okay, the people dancing? I'll give you another show, right? People dancing, I'll give you another show. That's the same thing that happened at a record company, because the record company wasn't necessarily moved by whether or not they really liked who you are. It's, will people come out and pay money to come and see you, right? And because the people had to come out and see something then that wasn't, it wasn't a machine. They could only see what's in front of them. The thing in front of them has to actually be good, has to be actually real, like a real apple, not a GMO apple, like an apple that we're gonna taste it, oh, that's a real apple. Okay, so give him a real record deal. Now, we get to the point of mass-produced production and machines and auto-tune and all these things, so the generation now that maybe comes afterwards looking at that, it's more difficult for them to tell the difference between the real one and the fake one, because they all look good, right? So the industry now that has been created based on this observation is different than the industry that was just looking at talent. So sometimes talent will get lost in that because the people looking at it don't really know the difference. You almost can't even blame them, because if you've only heard an auto-tune singer so much and that's the way your ear went, how would you know a flat sing? How would you know if somebody is not singing for real or singing for real, unless you were a musician? So now if you were a musician running a record company, maybe you might think that way, but what musicians are really going to run a record company and be in that position? Probably very few. And if they have to compete now with what's out there, they're going to be pushed to kind of keep up with what's happening. So for me, talent is always important. Like this young lady here, the reason I started working with her is because she sent me a demo. And she sent me demos. She sent me music that she had produced, and I didn't like the music. But when I saw I won't say I didn't like it. It wasn't anything that made me go, oh, I want to work with this person. But I asked her to send me her singing in the songs because I thought the songs were good. And when I just saw her with the piano and the voice, I said, okay, I'll work with that person. Now, that's me having been through Lauryn Hill, Alicia Keys, Amy Winehouse, Quincy Jones, these kinds of people. But now maybe if I wasn't that person, maybe I wouldn't. I would just look at, well, let me hear the record. I don't like the record. I don't like you. Or how many spins? Let me see, what's your Instagram following? No following? I'm not gonna do it. So that's a loaded question you're asking, because as a business, okay, I'm split. There's Commissioner Gordon, the business guy, because I've also ran a label. I've been at Columbia Records during the time I was doing Miseducation. I was responsible for A&R. I was responsible for signing artists. I did Beyonce's, worked on Beyonce's. I saw Beyonce as a little girl walk into a record company. I saw Alicia Keys as a 14-year-old girl playing classical music, and nobody wanted to even work with her because they thought that wasn't valuable. I remember an A&R person telling me when because I wanted to do a record with Alicia, I thought she was interesting, but she played a lot in 3/4 times. I don't know if you're a musician, but like 3/4 time is not necessarily dancing time. It's more like a waltz, dun, 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 like classical music. So she was trying to mess around with things like that, but now for these DJs, they wouldn't even listen to what she was trying to do. As soon as they heard the time, no, that's not gonna play on the radio. Get her out of here, right? But what ended up making Alicia Keys actually work? A song like Falling, which was a ballad that's based on the 3/4 time. But it took a person like Clive Davis, an elder who had listened to music. Clive Davis signed Aretha Franklin. So him at 70 years old, observing a 14 or 15, well, at that time, maybe a 18-year-old girl playing piano and singing, he had a reference point to say, oh, I like that. I'll get behind that. And then 2 years later, her record happens. So I don't want to say that to you and make you think that talent is not important, because talent is always important. But you do have to understand the business that we're in if you want to do it professionally. So sometimes, you know, if you just have the talent in this world now that we're in, and you don't have any following, you're probably not going to get attention by any company. But to me, what's the most important to me is the talent. But I am going to look at your drive, because if you're talented and you're not really smart, I wouldn't say smart, you're not really wise, then you probably won't get heard, because you could be very talented and be talented by yourself in a bedroom. You know, there was a guy talking yesterday, Vincent Berry, and he was doing an interview, and he was talking about data analytics, and he's a songwriter, and he's written for a lot of people. He's actually written for Beyonce, and he's written for a few other big artists. And he said he went to a seminar for some data guys, some computer guys, and they were talking about marketing and how when you're selling product in their world, they analyze the market first and then make a product. So they're basically guaranteeing that the product is going to work. They're not creating something without any reference point. They're going to see, well, what's the demographic? How many people are into this? What's the need in the marketplace? How much does it cost? What's the price point? So now when they create something, it has already a place, right? Sometimes with musicians, especially artists that are really artists, they create what they like. And because it's just what they like. Okay, but what do the people like? Like, what's going on? If you don't really look at that, I'm not saying copy it, but if you're trying to do it professionally, if it's not a hobby, and you're saying you want to be in the business of it, you do have to kind of know what's going on, and you do have to look at your social media, and you do have to, you know, have these things in place. But if you put that ahead of your music, then you won't really have music. Then that'll be the difference. If I go back to this guy that I just was talking about, Flavor, what impressed me about him is he had all of that, but when we came to the studio, the man played guitar, he played piano, he arranged background vocals. We could talk about music. He was well-rounded musically. So I'm saying, okay, he'll have that success, but he'll probably have a longer career, because when the trend goes, if the trend, because it's always going to change. Today it's Afrobeat, tomorrow it's going to be something else. When it's happening, you think it ain't going to change, but ask the guys who was doing bebop when they were hot, what was hot? That was hot, but that was 50 years ago. It's gone now, right? So the talent and the actual work will give you the career. But yeah, you do need the marketing and the promotion. You do need to at least understand how to do that for yourself. Did that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Oh, yeah, no, there's no problem. We still got about a half hour.
Thank you. This is great. And I just first want to say thank you for taking the time and putting things aside in the US to come to Africa and be able to do this and share your knowledge. You've talked a lot about your mentors and the people you looked up to and your opportunities to be able to hear from them.
Yes.
That is a big challenge in Africa. It almost feels like there was a generation of big artists, and then suddenly there was a gap. And now we're starting over with no one behind to give the advice, no one behind to give that little push or to carry them. And so your ability to walk the talk, if there's a way to, because what a lot of the African artists are looking at, it's what you are doing in the US, what others are doing in the US, how to bridge that gap so that the artists, the young artists in Africa have this ability to access the people that are there to be able to carry them forward.
Yeah.
Because there's a gap here. It's just very clear, and we need to fill it so that the artists can feel more confident about what they're doing. They can learn from the mistakes, and they can get that drive that you were talking about in seeing the examples from others.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's why I'm here. Well, I have an academy, so I teach. I mean, I got more involved in that probably in the last, the funny thing, you know, this whole journey started for me in South Africa in terms of education, because my first trip to South Africa was in 2002, and I was here with an artist named Leela James, and we were doing a show with John Legend, and it was for MTV Base at the time, and we were performing in Joburg. And while I was staying in Joburg, the hotel we were staying at, a driver that was, actually he wasn't even a driver, he was actually a bellman in the hotel who I would talk to, you know, in the mornings. I'd go downstairs and get breakfast, and he and I was always talking. So one day he came to me and he said to me, he said, you are an African man. I said, yeah, I know, I'm an African man. Yeah, I think so. He said, no. You have to see Africa, not this way, because we staying in a 5-star hotel. And I said, what do you mean? He said, if you will come, I will take you and show you the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I said, what do you mean by the good, the bad, and the ugly? He said, will you come? I said, well, I'm on a tight schedule, and you know, I can't really leave the hotel, because they had us basically, the days, everything was mapped out. You couldn't really move, and there was security, and it was all of this stuff. So he said, no, I know your schedule. You meet me 6 a.m., and I will take you, and I will show you good, the bad, and ugly. I was like, all right, bet, 6 o'clock. So I'll be back in time for sound check and all that stuff. 6 o'clock. So 6 a.m., I go downstairs, and I meet this guy. And now one of the keyboard players overheard me talking to him. So, of course, it was like, yo, Commish, you ain't leaving us, man. Like, where you going? I'm coming. I was like, all right, well, don't get in no trouble, because we got to be back. And, you know, I'm always kind of, I've had this dual role. Like, this is where this commissioner name comes from, because I'm always doing like 15 jobs. So I'm actually was like the road manager. I'm the responsible person as much as I'm the music person. So if I leave and I get them out, I'm the one in trouble, because I'm the one that's in charge. So I'm like, listen, if you guys are going to come with me, we got to be on time, and we got to be back, because blah, 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 whatever. So we meet 6 a.m., 5:30 actually, we were there, and we drive. But to compress a long story, that trip changed my life, because first we went to Soweto. He took us from there, and we drove about a half an hour, and we drove, and he took us into the town, and he took us to meet a woman who was running a guest house, and he showed us, like, okay, this is like how the average people live, and this is where they are. This is not where you are, uptown. Here's Africa. So we spent maybe 20 minutes there, and then he said, okay, now we're going to go to the bad. So now he takes us to the projects. He takes us a little deeper in, and this project area is an area that during apartheid, the men, because they couldn't come into the village to the city to work, the men now would, you know, everybody lived in the outskirts. So only the men that would be able to work would stay here. So of course, because you got all these men coming from different places, it became a rough kind of area. And then further on now, after apartheid, this same area now became actually like the projects. And now at this point, people were living there, but it was really a bad situation. And we had to go see the Don of the neighborhood. So like, I know about that from being in Jamaica. So Don is like the local crime boss of the neighborhood. So he comes, and he was cool. He was a young man, and he came and he brought him to us. But you know, you could tell it was thick. Everybody got their cutlass in their hand, and the guy spoke to him and brought him over to me. And he said, and I had a little video camera, and he said to me, he said, it's no problem, you can come. He said, but I want you to film and show them in America how a condition. So he takes us in, he takes me around, and he's explaining to me the whole, and I won't get into all of that, you know, it was very moving, you know, the conversation that I had with him, and he explained a few things to me, and then we leave there. And the conditions were, I mean, we in America, I know projects because I grew up in the hood, I know what a project is, but compared to the projects that we had, looking at the projects there, it wasn't a project, you know what I'm saying? So now we're gonna go to the ugly. So I'm leaving, and I'm saying to the driver, I'm saying, so we going the worst? well, like, where we going now? Like, really? Because now I'm like, I got the band and everybody with me. So I'm like, damn, where did I take them? You know, because even when we drove there, it was looking real like, okay, but everybody was cool. You know, like I said, once we saw him, he cleared the way. So nobody messed with us, anything. The guy took us in. So he said, all right, we're going to go to the market first. So we go to the marketplace, and the marketplace was maybe 10 minutes away. And it was the hustle, like the real African market. But again, me being from the Caribbean, I know the market in Jamaica, and it's the hustling, and you got to order, or in St. Lucia. My mom is from St. Lucia. My dad is from Trinidad. So I know what that is. So, you know, we go in there and we buy some things. So I'm thinking, well, damn, that's the ugly? That's where you're taking us to? And he said, no, we didn't get there yet. Now we going to the ugly, which was going to the township. So now we drive maybe another 20 minutes or so, and we're passing on the highway, and he's showing us these townships and Shantytown. And again, I know that from Jamaica, like where Bob came up in Trenchtown. But this was just bigger, you know what I mean? Like a shantytown in Jamaica, yeah, there's a couple thousand people. This was like thousands of, you know? And, you know, as we're driving, he's telling us, okay, this one here, you know, 60% AIDS. This one here, X amount of percent AIDS. This one we're going to now, no, the young people run it because most of the elders have passed. And there's no police, there's no anything. So now we pull up now at one of the townships, and same kind of thing. He goes in, and he talks to someone, and a young man comes out. He's about 17. This kid spoke 8 languages. He had no shoes on. He was the most articulate young man I have ever met. He was the he was the one who ran the place. He took care of his own home, but because there was no police or anybody in the situation, he was like the judge, the jury, and when I'm talking to him, it's like talking to somebody older than me. But like I said, he was 17, and he was so articulate. But now he's explaining to me that, you know, a lot of the young people can't go to school because if you don't have shoes, you can't go to school, but they want to go to school. And, you know, he's telling me all the things. So, you know, I'm just, as soon as by the time he's finished with me, it's like tears are in my eye. And he says, okay, but we're going to go inside. So I'm like, okay, he's going to take us in. Yeah, so he holds my hand, and he says, come on. So now he walks me in and out. The musicians all like, you know, I'm sorry, I don't have no money. And she said, no, I don't want any money. What is your name? And she goes to shake my hand. Listen, that was like tears, and she tells me her name, and she says, come, I want to take you to my father. So she takes me into one of the homes, and again, I've been in we would call them galvanized house, like just aluminum, right? The house had 4 walls held together with just bricks holding it. The father was there. 10 people live in this house. It was the size of, it's not even the size, maybe from you to here, and maybe to my son, maybe a little bit further. And it had a little patch of land in the front, and that's basically where they would collect their water and grow what little food they could grow there. And he's explaining to me that the temperature in this house could go from snow in the winter all the way to like 120 degrees in the summer. There's no walls. It's just bricks holding it up. And we sat and we talked, and again, the most, it was a very moving, you know, experience. And but that's when I decided that I have to use my music to help Africa. So it was that day that I said, okay, I need to do something different with the music. You know, I touched all these people, and everybody knew me, but it wasn't really, it felt like nothing was more important than that, you know? So we do the show, and we're all out, you know, all these people, and, you know, it was a big show. It actually went really well. But that evening, I met an ambassador from Cameroon. He happened to be at the show. So after the show, I was telling him about my experience, and he said to me, I was like, yeah, you know, I got to figure out a way, man, to use my music. I want to do something. I want to build something in the township. I thought about maybe developing like a youth center or something. I didn't really know what, you know, I'm just brainstorming. And he said to me that, he said, you know, I'm not the ambassador. He said, you're an ambassador. I said, what do you mean? He said, you're a music ambassador. And when he said that to me, it kind of stuck in my head, a music ambassador. I said, okay, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So that started me creating my academy and Lalabelle Academy and working with kids and everything. So to go through that whole thing and to come back here, you know, for something like this is it's not by chance, you know. At that point, I hadn't even